truth is something people fear more than anything in the world.
Truthful Tuesday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Richard Clark. I'm a hypnotherapist for the last 8 years, and I've been a holistic therapist for the last 14 years. Subject I've talked about today was censorship. I'm going to also talk about another thing, is cancel culture, and how that affects people and how it works. So cancel culture is a cultural phenomenon in which individuals are thought to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner, which is ostracised, boycotted, shunned, fired, or assaulted, often aided by social media. This shunning may extend to social or professional circles, whether on social media or in person, which mostly feature high-profile incidents involving celebrities. Those subject to this are said to have been cancelled. The term cancel culture came into circulation in the late 2010s and early 2020s and has mostly negative connotations. The term call-out culture is used by some for the same concept. So, some critics argue that cancel culture has a chilling effect on public discourse. Unproductive, does not bring real social change, causes intolerance, amounts to cyberbullying. Others argue that it's a term used to attack efforts to promote accountability or give disenfranchised people a voice, and to attack language that is in itself freedom of speech. So this is what I was talking about with censorship. If we live in a democratic society, we should have freedom of speech. Now, like they say, the mistermed thing of Voltaire is, I feel people should have freedom of speech, and it's my agreement whether I agree in it or not, but I do believe they should have the freedom to say it. Absolutely agree the same. If you don't allow people to say what they need to say, then it goes underground, and then that causes underground problems, which then will cause rioting, problematic issues which do not get talked about, sorted about, discourse, or even in like a context of actually getting sorted out. So, still others question whether cancel culture is a natural phenomenon, arguing that boycotters have existed long before the term of cancel culture. I think cancel culture is kind of like a new form of it, social media, and then also we get the other side of it as well, is that some people are literally more or less what I call guilty or judged by social media before they even go to court, and I think that is wrong. So in that respect, I believe that we should always have that if someone is charged or they're accused, actually until you've got all the evidence and they've gone to court and gone through the criminal justice system, then we can know how that works. Now, I don't think that always works. Some people seem to get away with things and so forth, but long term, people get caught out, even if people get away with things. So the origins actually is quite interesting. Where the origin first came from was in 1981's Chic album Take It Off included the song Your Love Is Cancelled, which compares the breakup to the cancellation of TV shows. The song was written by Nile Rodgers following a bad date Rodgers had experienced with a woman expecting to misuse his celebrity status on her behalf. And within this Love Is Cancelled inspired screenwriting and included a reference to a woman being cancelled in the 1990 film One New Jack City. The usage intertermed Your Love Is Cancelled or being cancelled into the vernacular. Now, by 2015, the concept of cancelling had become widespread on Black Twitter, they call it. So Black Twitter is this idea of, it's an internet community largely consisting of the black diaspora of users in the United States, to refer to personal decisions, sometimes serious and sometimes in jest, to stop supporting a person or work. So according to this cancellation includes the total disinvestment in something or anything. After numerous cases of online shaming gained wide notoriety, the use of the term cancellation increased to describe a widespread, outraged online response to a single provocative statement against a single target. Also, the Me Too movement was also a black diaspora idea, and then obviously it's been hijacked by mass media and then woke liberals, white liberals. Then we've also had that with also the idea of woke agenda. Woke agenda, the idea of being woke was actually that you're more aware of what's going on. Now woke agenda is seen to be a leftist idea, which is not what actually the concept was. So again, people misuse connotations from culture and then reimagine them or make them appropriate to the mass. It's kind of stealing, it's cultural appropriation really, on a sort of subliminal level. So again, the conversation about cancel culture increased in late 2019 due to this was happening with politically incorrect speech. So the term is shambolically applied to incidents both online and off that range from vigilante justice to hostile debate to stalking, intimidation and harassment. And this happens a lot now because the trouble is people will use this idea we've got to cancel people, and a lot of this can be bad rumours just because someone has has a problem with someone, and then it's become something which is actually sometimes can be true, sometimes not. Again, this is why I believe a censorship is not a good thing, because if you can't get the information to find out everything, then what you can do is be accusing someone of something they have never said. Call-out culture has been used as a part of the Me Too movement, which I explained earlier. The Me Too movement encouraged women and men to call out their abusers on a forum where the accusations would be heard, especially against very powerful individuals. Additionally, the Black Lives Matter movement, BLM, seeks to highlight inequalities, racism and discrimination experienced by the black community, repeatedly called out police officers who were killing black men and women across the nation. So this idea of cancel culture becomes, I think it's more of an American thing, but it has then creeped into especially into media, and it can also be consumer backlash as well. So for example, recently Bud Light had an issue because they got a person called Dylan Mulvaney to support it, and Dylan Mulvaney says they are a woman, but they clearly haven't had the operations, but they class it as, again, this is about gender identification, and that had a backlash because for some reason Bud Light was seen drank by Republicans, rednecks, sort of conservative people. I don't know. I, again, didn't really care too much, but these are sort of things people talk about. So the criticism of cancel culture is Barack Obama, ironically, in 2020, criticised cancel culture and woke mentality on social media, which is quite interesting because Barack Obama was supposed to be so about that culture. He was about the idea of people being accountable, but then he actually has criticised it. He's also said people who do really good stuff have flaws. People who are fighting may love their kids and share certain things with you. Now that's interesting because, for example, Barack Obama also got Harvey Weinstein in his government to help do fundraisers and so forth. He also got other very people who shouldn't have been allowed in governments with their actual background. He knew about Harvey Weinstein, he knew about Bill Cosby, and he certainly knew about other people, but for some reason he let that slide. But anyway, then another person who was the polar opposite of that was Donald Trump, criticised cancel culture in a speech in July 2020. So in fact, it's quite interesting, both Obama and Trump have very similar viewpoints, but there's a difference. It's like Obama's seen as a messianic sort of idea, and Trump is seen as this like redneck appealing to that sort of KKK, that sort of thing. This is how it's seen in the mass media anyway. Trump compared it to totalitarianism. So again, totalitarianism is about the idea of is a political system and a form of government that prohibits opposition political parties, disregards and outlaws the political claims of individual and group opposition to the state. So interesting how they both saw the same thing, but one seemed to get criticised for it and the other didn't. So again, Trump has done this, made similar claims during the 2020 Republican National Convention, where he stated that the goal of cancel culture is to make decent Americans live in fear of being fired, expelled, shamed, humiliated, and driven from society. And then also Trump then goes probably a bit further without implementing it. It's then also done on racial and also sexism as well. Pope Francis is also accused, says that cancel culture is a form of ideological colonisation, one that leaves no room for freedom of expression. However, this is where it gets a bit interesting. So Patrice Cairns-Collos, the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter, states that social activism does not just involve going online or going to protest to call someone out, but is work entailing strategy, sessions, meetings and getting petitions signed. Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister of the UK, also included cancel culture where one group are trying to impose their views on the rest of the world and on the contemporary dangers of the modern world. And there's other philosophers that say cancel culture with its implicit paranoia is a desperate and obsessive, obvious self-defeating attempt to compensate for the real violence and intolerance that sexual minority have long suffered. It is a retreat into a cultural fortress, a pseudo-safe space. And cancel culture actually came from the origins of it. Cancel culture was actually also another Russian thing which was done in communism. So again, all these ideas are communist ideas. Cancel culture, you can't say this, you can't say that. That's very much what dictators do and communism countries do, but it's creeped into democracy. So also cancel culture is regarded as a cultural boycott. And then what we have to look at this is when things come out of date, a lot of things are dated, right? That happens a lot. And so some things, this is where I think if you're a parent, you have to observe what's going on in the world, and then you have to make that conscious decision. Do you want your children to view this? Do you accept what was done? and so forth. And they now put warnings on films and so forth. But again, I think this is about education. If you educate people what is right and wrong and what they do within that framework, then people can actually understand that and look at something and go, okay, I accept that or I don't accept that. And that's actually up to the individual. And I think that's where government shouldn't do that. They shouldn't counsel people and have their own aspect of it. A number of professors, politicians, journalists and activists question the validity of cancel culture as an actual phenomenon. It seems to be an issue that people can say certain things, and then actually someone else has written this, which is actually interesting. LeVar Burton and Sonny Hostin has stated that cancel culture should be renamed consequence culture. And the idea is that if you say something, there should be a consequence to it. Now, that depends on who the people feel the consequence should be aimed at. Because if someone says something which they see in their truth or their community and they say this is happening, then should they be counselled for it? Instead of being counselled for it, maybe actually explore it, double check the validity of it, and then counsel them. But what people do is they counsel people too quickly without actually investigating it. And the idea is actually, as human beings, we should always investigate, we should always research. I don't just read one source of information and go, right, that's what I believe. You should always look at many sources. And I've seen this in a lot of people who they bring down, especially famous people. Because actually normal people would never get cancelled. I don't believe. I think it's always a famous thing because of the influence they have. So, yeah, it's interesting. But again, probably one of the best actual things about cancel culture against it was cancel. South Park campaign was done on the South Park cartoon. It's very cleverly done. But then there's also different things about how people now believe that we, with culture war, people culture appropriation and so forth, this all comes within cancel culture. Again, I feel that the individual, again, when I'm working with clients, they're so worried. There's actually people I've actually worked with who have been cancelled and they're worried about how they're ever going to get back known, how that's going to work. And so actually a lot of people will work under pseudonyms, and that happens a lot. So I don't think it's always as bleak as people think. But to me, cancel culture, I believe, is wrong. Consequence culture is if someone says something and people don't agree with it and it's actually incorrect factually, then they should be cancelled. But I don't believe that cancelling people actually helps. I think people should have an opinion, and you as an individual should be able to make up your mind whether you believe it or not. And the trouble is, because most people don't read correctly or get information from a wide range of sources, that is my issue. So I'm very wary of who I listen to, and I'm very wary of, if I hear something, I'll be like, okay, I'll listen to that person, then I'll think, right, let me go and research it and then make up my own informed opinion or actually what I believe. And mostly, actually, most people, when they come up with stuff, is rubbish, to be honest. And actually, when you're working with hypnotherapy, a lot of clients say things, they say, oh, this has gone on, this has gone on. Actually, a lot of it, when you find out, is a lot of it's incorrect information. So you have to be very wary of that. So anyway, if anybody wants a discussion on this, cancel culture, I think it's an important subject. And as I'll be sharing it today, please questions me, social media wise. I'm always willing to listen. And
Truth is something people fear more than anything in the world.